The floating gardens of Nixval hung suspended in perpetual twilight, connected to the ground by nothing but ancient magic and the stubborn will of its caretaker. Thorn didn't mind the solitude. After 5 years of exile, he'd grown accustomed to the whispers of the luminous flora and the soft humming of pollinator sprites that drifted between the suspended islands of his sanctuary. His purple skin, marked with intricate silver sigils denoting his botanical expertise, absorbed the ambient light as he moved between the hanging terrariums. Each floating garden platform housed specimens from across the 7 realms, many salvaged from worlds now crumbled to dust from the ongoing convergence wars. "You're wilting again," he murmured to a cluster of moonfire orchids, their petals closing prematurely against the artificial mist. With careful precision, he adjusted the nutrient flow beneath their roots, watching as the crystalline solution spiraled upward through transparent veins in the soil. The Council of Magisters had sentenced him to this place as punishment for his excessive empathy toward non-sentient growth forms. A fancy way of saying he'd refused to weaponize his botanical creations for their wars. They could have imprisoned him, executed him even. Instead, they'd given him this, a forgotten garden outpost on the edge of charted space, where his talents could still serve the realm without his uncomfortable questions about ethics. The proximity alarm chimed softly, a quiet invasion of his thoughts. Thorn frowned, moving toward the central nexus where monitoring crystals pulsed with amber light. No supply vessels were scheduled for another month. The readings indicated movement along the garden's northern periphery, something small disturbing the protective barrier that encircled his domain. Wildlife, perhaps. The floating islands attracted curious creatures from the forests below, though few could navigate the magical currents that kept the gardens aloft. He took his time walking the suspended bridges between platforms, the translucent pathways shimmering beneath his bare feet. The northern terrace housed his newest acquisitions, dreamleaf saplings with transparent trunks that revealed the slow dance of sap rising through their bodies. That's when he saw it, a flash of blue among the pale purple foliage. "Hello," he called, his voice rough from disuse. Silence answered, but the dream leaves trembled slightly, betraying movement beneath their canopy. Thorn approached slowly, hands visible, empty. "I won't harm you," he said. "But you shouldn't be here. These plants are temperamental." A small face peered out from behind a luminous trunk, eyes wide and wary. A child, no more than 6 or 7 years by human reckoning, with skin the color of a cloudless sky. Her hair fell in white waves to her shoulders, and tiny bioluminescent freckles dotted her cheeks like scattered stars. A Celestine child. Here, of all places. "The flowers talk to me," she whispered, pointing to a cluster of echo blossoms that swayed despite the absence of wind. "They said you weren't scary." Thorn crouched to her level, careful to maintain distance. "The flowers exaggerate. I can be quite terrifying when my tea gets cold." The girl giggled, a sound so foreign in this place of quiet growth that several nearby spore pods burst open in surprise, releasing clouds of glowing dust that drifted around them like miniature galaxies. "I'm Petra," she said, stepping fully into view. Her clothes were travel-worn but clean, reinforced fabric designed for harsh environments. Not a lost child, then. Someone had prepared her for a journey. "I'm Thorn." He tilted his head. "How did you get past the barrier?" "Mama found a crack." She pointed vaguely toward the eastern edge. "She said to find the purple man with the silver marks who makes things grow. She said you might not send us away." "Us." "Of course." The child wasn't alone. "And where is your mother now?" Petra's expression clouded. "Hiding. She's tired. She told me to see if you were kind first." Something cold settled in Thorn's stomach. Refugees, then. The convergence wars had created thousands of them, families displaced as entire realms collapsed or were conquered. The Celestines had been targeted particularly viciously, their natural bioluminescence and affinity for starlight magic making them valuable as living energy sources for the war machines. "Are you being followed?" he asked quietly. Petra's lower lip trembled. The bad ones with the silver eyes. Mama says they want to take me away because I'm special. Harvesters. Bounty hunters who specialized in tracking down and capturing rare beings for the highest bidder. Thorn had heard stories, children with unique abilities sold to power generators or research facilities, their life force slowly drained until nothing remained. His hands clenched involuntarily, causing nearby plants to curl protectively inward. The girl flinched at the movement. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, relaxing his posture. "I'm not angry with you. Can you take me to your mother?" Petra studied him for a long moment, head tilted as though listening to something he couldn't hear. Then she nodded, reaching out a small blue hand. "The flowers say you're safe." Thorn hesitated before accepting her hand. Physical contact was something he'd nearly forgotten in his years of isolation. Her fingers felt impossibly small in his. She led him across hanging bridges and through misty gardens, eventually arriving at a small maintenance alcove near the eastern barrier. The space was normally used to store tools and nutrient solutions, but now contained something entirely different. A woman sat with her back against the wall, knees drawn to her chest. Like her daughter, her skin was blue, though darker, like twilight rather than midday sky. Silver scars traced patterns across her exposed forearms, not decorative sigils like thorns, but brands of some kind. Her white hair was braided tightly against her skull, revealing pointed ears adorned with simple copper rings. When she saw them approach, she moved with startling speed, placing herself between Thorn and her daughter despite the obvious pain the sudden movement caused her. "He's the garden man," Petra announced, slipping from Thorn's grasp to her mother's side. "The flowers like him." The woman's gaze was piercing, assessing. "My name is Wren," she said finally. "We need sanctuary. Just for a few days." Thorn should refuse. The gardens were his prison, yes, but also his responsibility. Harboring fugitives would violate the terms of his exile. If discovered, the council would not be merciful a second time. But the child was looking at him with absolute trust, and her mother with desperate hope barely concealed beneath her pride. "The Magister's sensors sweep this area every 3 days," he said. "The next one is scheduled tomorrow at dawn. If you're still here then, we'll all face consequences." Wren's posture stiffened. "We'll be gone before first light." "Mama, no," Petra whispered. "I'm tired of running." Something in Thorn's chest constricted at the weariness in the child's voice. How long had they been fleeing? What horrors had those young eyes witnessed? He made his decision before his better judgment could intervene. "There's a way to mask your presence during the scans. A modification to the garden's protective barriers." He hesitated. "It's not authorized, and if detected, would extend my sentence considerably." "Why would you risk that for strangers?" Wren asked, suspicion edging her voice. Thorn looked at Petra, then at the gardens around them, his beautiful prison. "Because this place was meant to nurture life, not merely preserve it." For the first time, Wren's expression softened slightly. "We can't pay you." "I have no use for currency here," he replied. Then, noticing how she swayed slightly with exhaustion, "You both need rest and nourishment. The living quarters are this way." As he led them through the hanging gardens, Thorn felt the weight of eyes upon him, not just his unexpected guests, but the watching crystal of the Magisters, perpetually monitoring his exile. By morning, when the scan swept through, he would have made enemies in high places. And yet, as Petra gasped in delight at a cluster of starflower vines unfurling to reveal glowing centers, Thorn couldn't bring himself to regret his choice. The gardens had been silent for too long. Perhaps it was time they heard laughter again. "Would you like me to continue with part 2? Dawn crept slowly across the floating gardens of Nixfall, the artificial lights shifting from midnight blue to soft lavender as the day cycle began. Thorn had been awake for hours, hands deep in the soil of the central control platform where the garden's main systems converged. Sweat beaded on his purple brow as he carefully redirected energy flows through the root systems. Will they notice? Ren's voice came from behind him, startling him enough that a nearby sensitivity plant curled its leaves defensively. Not if I do this correctly, Thorn replied without looking up. His fingers traced sigils in the soil, activating dormant pathways. The gardens are designed to adapt to environmental shifts. I'm simply creating a harmless anomaly in the barrier frequency, a false reading that will mask your biological signatures. He sensed rather than saw her approach, her steps carefully measured as she knelt beside him at the edge of the soil bed. In the morning light, her blue skin had a subtle iridescence he hadn't noticed the night before. You've done this before, she observed. Thorn's hands stilled momentarily. Not for people. For plants the council deemed too dangerous to cultivate. Species with consciousness, with memories. Plants with memories. Whisperwoods, he explained. They record conversations held beneath their branches. The Magisters wanted them destroyed, too much potential for espionage. I hid them instead. He gestured to a distant floating island where silver-barked trees swayed gently, their leaves continuously shifting as though in silent conversation. Ren studied him with renewed interest. You're not what I expected from a Magister's exile. And what did you expect? Someone broken. Bitter. Loyal to the institution that cast them out. Thorn finally met her gaze. Who says I'm not broken? The garden's alert system pulsed once, interrupting their exchange. Thorn placed his palm against a nearby trunk, absorbing the information through the connection. The scan is beginning, he said. We'll know soon enough if my alterations worked. Minutes passed in tense silence as the invisible wave of magical detection swept through the gardens. Thorn could feel it in the subtle tremor of leaves, the momentary pause in the nutrient flow through the roots. At the edge of his awareness, he sensed Petra still sleeping in the chamber he prepared for them, her breathing steady and calm. Finally, the gardens settled again, returned to their usual rhythms. We're clear, he announced. The barrier accepted the modifications. The relief that washed over Ren's face was subtle but profound. For just a moment, her careful composure faltered, revealing the exhaustion beneath. Thank you, she said simply. Thorn nodded, uncomfortable with gratitude after so many years alone. He stood, brushing soil from his hands. Your daughter was ill last night. Fever dreams. Ren's expression tightened. She hasn't adjusted well to the emergency rations. Her system is unique. Half Celestine, Thorn surmised, recalling the girl's features. The other half? Meravian, she answered after a hesitation. From my side. That explained the deeper blue of her skin compared to Petra's. Meravians were known for their resilience and adaptability, traits that had made them valuable allies during the early days of the Convergence Wars, before their realm had been conquered. The gardens produce fresh food, Thorn said. Fruits, vegetables, proteins from the fungal beds. Real food might help her recover faster. Ren's expression was skeptical. You would share your supplies? They replenish themselves, he replied with a shrug. That's what gardens do. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, the first he'd seen. It transformed her face, softening the wariness that seemed etched into her features. Mama. Petra's voice rang out across the platform. She bounded toward them, her white hair tangled from sleep but her eyes bright and clear. The fever had broken sometime in the night. The window in our room has fish swimming outside it. But they're not wet. Luminescent air jellies, Thorn explained. They're attracted to the eastern platforms this time of year. Petra skipped to the edge of the platform, peering out at the drifting creatures that pulsed with internal light. Can I touch one? They're harmless, Thorn assured her. But you need breakfast first. The morning unfolded in a strange new rhythm unlike any Thorn had experienced during his exile. He showed them to the food gardens, where Petra delighted in harvesting moonberries and cloud peppers under his guidance. Ren watched them carefully, her body always positioned between her daughter and the garden's edge, eyes constantly scanning the distant horizons. Always ready to run, Thorn realized. Always anticipating the moment peace would shatter. As they ate breakfast on a small terrace overlooking the lower gardens, Petra bombarded him with questions about every plant they passed, every creature that drifted by on the magical currents. "How do the islands float?" she asked, mouth full of starfruit. "Etherium crystals embedded in the root systems," Thorn explained. "They respond to the botanical energy patterns, creating a sustained levitation field." "Can they go higher? Can we visit the clouds?" "Petra," Ren admonished gently. "Don't pester him." "It's fine," Thorn said, surprising himself. "I don't mind explaining. It's been a long time since anyone asked." After breakfast, Petra discovered a family of nectar bats nesting in a hollow beneath one of the bridges and became thoroughly entranced. This allowed Thorn and Ren a moment of privacy as they gathered medicinal herbs from a small terraced garden. "How long have you been running?" Thorn asked quietly, handing her a basket. Ren's hands moved with practiced efficiency among the plants. "Since before she could walk. Almost 6 years now." "And the harvesters? Why are they pursuing you specifically?" Her hands stilled. "Petra is special. Even among Celestine Merivian hybrids." "Special how?" Ren glanced to where her daughter was carefully offering a flower to the smallest of the nectar bats. "She can communicate with living things. Not just animals, but plants. Even the dormant magic in stones." Thorn nodded slowly. "I noticed the flowers responded to her. I thought it was simply their natural reaction to movement. It's more than that. She understands them. They understand her." Ren looked directly at him. The Convergence armies would use her as a biological weapon, a way to control environmental systems during invasions. The implication settled coldly in Thorn's chest. A child who could command plant life could devastate ecosystems, create passageways through impossible terrain, even turn a realm's own natural defenses against it. "Her father," he asked, "died protecting us during our initial escape. He was Celestine royalty, which made their union forbidden to begin with." A shadow crossed her face. "And made Petra even more valuable to those who would use her." The communication crystal at Thorn's wrist pulsed suddenly, a perimeter alert. He frowned, focusing on the magical feedback flowing through the garden network. "Something's approaching," he said. "Not a Magister's vessel. Smaller, faster." Ren's entire demeanor changed instantly. She straightened, head turning toward the direction of the alert. "Where's the nearest exit point?" "There are emergency transport pods on the western platform, but—" "Petra," she called, her voice controlled but urgent. "Come here, love." The girl looked up from her bats, immediately sensing the change in atmosphere. "Are the bad people coming?" she asked, her voice small as she hurried to her mother's side. Thorn accessed the garden's defensive systems through a nearby trunk, expanding his awareness through the network of plants and roots. "It's a scout vessel. Unregistered. Currently circling the lower perimeter." "They're tracking us," Ren said grimly. "Sooner than I expected." "How did they find you so quickly?" Thorn asked. She touched the scars on her forearm. "Trace elements in these brands. They dampen the signal, but can't eliminate it entirely. The garden's barrier should prevent detection," Thorn said. "But they might have picked up your trail before you entered." "We need to leave," Ren decided, already gathering their few possessions. "No." The word surprised Thorn as much as it did her. "If you leave now, they'll spot you immediately. The transport pods aren't designed for stealth. We can't stay. We've put you at risk already." "Let me check something first," Thorn said, placing both hands against the nearest tree trunk, focusing his botanical connection deeper into the garden's systems. Minutes passed as he communed with the central intelligence of the floating sanctuary. When he finally pulled away, his expression was thoughtful. The vessel is conducting a standard search pattern. They haven't detected you specifically, they're responding to the disruption in your trail. If you remain within the garden's barriers, the masking should hold. Ren hesitated, clearly torn between flight and the fragile safety of their current haven. Mama, Petra tugged at her sleeve. The flowers say we're safe here. They promised. Thorn and Ren's eyes met over the child's head. An understanding passed between them, not trust, not yet, but a mutual recognition of the stakes involved. One more day, Ren conceded finally. But we prepare for immediate departure if anything changes. Agreed, Thorn said. In the meantime, let me show you how the garden's defense systems work. Just in case. As they followed him deeper into the floating sanctuary, Thorn was acutely aware of the delicate balance he'd disturbed. For 5 years, he'd maintained a careful equilibrium, not happy, but content in his isolation, protected by the very punishment meant to break him. Now, with every passing hour, the boundaries of his exile were shifting. The gardens no longer felt like a prison but a fortress, one he found himself increasingly determined to defend. And as Petra's laughter echoed across the suspended platforms, coaxing flowers to bloom in her wake, Thorn realized with unsettling clarity that he was no longer merely sheltering fugitives. He was choosing sides in a war he had once refused to fight. Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. 3.7 The artificial twilight of Nixfall's night cycle cast long shadows across the suspended gardens. Thorn stood at the edge of the eastern platform, hands resting on the living railing that pulsed gently beneath his touch. 3 days had passed since the scout vessel's first appearance. It hadn't left, merely retreated to a distance just beyond the garden's scanning range, hovering like a predator waiting for its prey to make a mistake. You should be resting, Ren said, appearing silently beside him. Her ability to move without disturbing the sensitive plants impressed him. Most visitors trampled through the gardens, oblivious to the living network beneath their feet. The dream leaves need attention, he replied, nodding toward a cluster of saplings whose transparent trunks revealed sluggish sap flow. They're sensitive to emotional disturbances. Ren studied the plants with a critical eye. You mean they're responding to your anxiety? A faint smile touched his lips. Perhaps. And mine, she acknowledged. She leaned against the railing, her gaze fixed on the distant darkness where they both knew the scout ship lurked. We need to leave, Thorn. Every day we stay puts you at greater risk. The modifications to the barrier are holding, he countered. And Petra's health has improved significantly. It was true. With proper nutrition and the garden's natural healing environment, the child had flourished. Her skin now shimmered with healthy bioluminescence, and she spent her days exploring the suspended islands, conversing with plants in ways that even Thorn, with all his botanical expertise, couldn't fully comprehend. That doesn't change the fact that harboring us violates your exile terms, Ren said. If the Magisters discover us, they'll what? Extend my sentence. Send me somewhere worse. His voice held an edge she hadn't heard before. There is nowhere worse for someone like me. At least not anywhere I'd still be alive. Ren turned to face him fully, her expression serious in the soft bioluminescent light. Why are you really helping us, Thorn? The truth this time. He was silent for a long moment, his purple fingers tracing patterns on the living railing. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. During the early Convergence Wars, I worked for the Council developing agricultural solutions for war-torn realms. Sustainable food sources, rapid growth forests for realm stabilization. His jaw tightened. Then they asked me to develop botanical weapons. Plants that could identify enemy signatures and target them selectively. Living weapons that wouldn't stop growing, spreading, killing. And you refused. I did worse than refuse. I sabotaged their research, destroyed years of development. His silver sigils seemed to pulse with the memory. When they realized what I'd done, they gave me a choice, execution for treason or permanent exile maintaining these gardens. Understanding dawned in Ren's eyes. You're not just an exile. You're a political prisoner. A useful one, Thorn corrected. The gardens produce rare botanical specimens that fuel the Magister's war efforts. My skills keep them thriving. He met her gaze directly. I'm helping you because I'm tired of nurturing life just to have it harvested for death. The confession hung between them, more intimate than either had expected. Ren reached out, her blue fingers hesitating before gently touching the sigils on his forearm. These aren't just botanical identifiers, are they? Control mechanisms, he confirmed. They limit my connection to the plant network, prevent me from extending my influence beyond the garden boundaries. Can they be removed? Not without killing me. They're linked to my life force now. Ren's expression darkened. The Magisters truly excel at elegant cruelty. A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind that only forms when two people recognize the shared weight they carry. In the distance, bioluminescent clouds drifted past the garden perimeter, momentarily illuminating the vastness beyond their floating sanctuary. Petra talks about you constantly, Ren said finally. She thinks you're some kind of plant wizard. Thorn chuckled. A flattering misconception. She doesn't form attachments easily. Not anymore. Ren's voice softened. Not after losing her father. Not after years of running. She's an extraordinary child. She is. Ren hesitated. Too extraordinary for her own safety. Before Thorn could respond, a tremor passed through the platform beneath their feet. The dream leaves shuddered, their sap suddenly flowing backward in alarm. Thorn immediately placed his palm against the nearest trunk, connecting to the garden's awareness. Proximity alert, he murmured, eyes unfocused as information flowed through his botanical connection. The scout vessel is moving. Approaching rapidly from the western quadrant. Ren was already in motion. They found us. We need to get Petra. Wait. Thorn gripped her arm. Something's not right. The garden's outer sensors are detecting a second vessel, larger, heavier. Magister class. Reinforcements? No. Thorn's expression shifted to one of confusion. It's intercepting the scout ship. Forcing it away from the gardens. They watched as distant flashes of light erupted beyond the barrier, brief, violent bursts that illuminated the clouds in stark relief before fading into darkness. The Magisters are attacking the harvesters? Ren asked, disbelief evident in her voice. It appears so, Thorn replied, equally puzzled. But why would they? The answer hit them simultaneously. They're protecting their asset, Ren whispered. Me, Thorn confirmed grimly. Or rather, the gardens. They must have detected unusual activity within the barrier. But not us specifically. The masking held, he assured her. But the energy fluctuations required to maintain it might have triggered automated defenses. Another tremor shook the platform, stronger this time. Several nutrient lines ruptured, spraying crystalline solution into the air before the self-healing systems engaged. Something's breached the outer perimeter, Thorn said, his connection to the gardens feeding him information faster than he could process it. Not a vessel, smaller. Escape pods, maybe. Ren's expression hardened. Harvesters. Taking advantage of the distraction to infiltrate on foot. She turned toward the central platforms. I need to get to Petra. Go, Thorn ordered. I'll activate the internal defenses. As Ren sprinted across the suspended bridge toward the living quarters, Thorn pressed both hands deep into the soil of a nearby growth bed. Silver sigils flared with power as he channeled his consciousness through the garden network, awakening dormant systems designed for environmental protection. Vines thickened across vulnerable access points. Mist dispensers released subtle sedative compounds into low-lying areas. Luminescent markers dimmed throughout the peripheral platforms, plunging much of the garden into strategic darkness while brightening critical escape routes. When he withdrew from the connection, sweat beaded on his forehead and his breathing came in short gasps. The gardens had responded to his commands, but the effort had pushed against the limitations of his control sigils. Pain radiated up his arms where the silver markings now pulsed an angry red. He found Ren and Petra in the central nexus, the child clutching a small bag of possessions while her mother checked the exit routes on a projected map of the gardens. The transport pods are still operational, Thorn said as he joined them. But launching now would make you visible to both vessels. What about the eastern tunnels? Ren asked. The maintenance shafts that run beneath the main platforms. Thorn shook his head. They all lead to external access points. Too exposed. Petra tugged at his sleeve. The whispering trees told me about a hidden place, she said. They showed me while you were sleeping. Both adults turned to her in surprise. What hidden place, sweetheart? Ren asked. Under the Crying Falls, where the roots go deep. Petra closed her eyes, as if listening to a distant voice. The trees remember when it was built. Before the flying gardens. A safe place. Thorn's expression shifted from confusion to realization. The original terraforming chamber. It predates the floating platforms, built into the anchor point where the gardens connect to the ground. He looked at Ren. It wouldn't appear on any current schematics. Would it be secure? Theoretically, yes. The chamber was designed to withstand atmospheric instability during the initial terraforming process. He hesitated. But I've never accessed it. It might not even be functional after all this time. Another tremor shook the platform, this one violent enough to knock several storage containers from their shelves. Alarm crystals throughout the nexus pulsed urgent warnings. We don't have a choice, Ren decided. Petra, can you show us the way? The girl nodded solemnly. The trees will help. They moved through the darkened gardens with practiced stealth, Petra leading them along paths Thorn had never noticed despite his years tending the floating sanctuary. The whisperwood seemed to bend toward her as they passed, their silver branches shifting to create protected corridors through their midst. The trees are hiding us, Petra whispered, her small blue hand firmly clasped in Thorn's. They don't like the mean people either. At the furthest edge of the garden complex, where the lowest platform nearly touched the perpetual mist that shrouded the ground below, Petra led them to what appeared to be a solid wall of interwoven roots and vines. Here, she said confidently. Behind the crying water. A thin waterfall cascaded over the tangled vegetation, feeding the mist pools below. Thorn approached cautiously, examining the structure with both botanical expertise and growing wonder. This isn't natural growth, he murmured. It's deliberate camouflage. He pressed his hands against the seemingly solid wall. The vines responded to his touch, recognizing the signature of his botanical connection. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to part, revealing a narrow passage illuminated by ancient bioluminescent fungi that had evolved in isolation for decades. The trees were right, Petra said, a hint of pride in her voice. The passage descended steeply, transitioning from organic materials to stone and finally to reinforced metals that spoke of the original terraforming technology. After nearly 10 minutes of careful descent, they emerged into a vast circular chamber dominated by a massive control console that curved around a central pillar of pulsing crystal. The heart of Nixfall, Thorn breathed. The original terraforming engine. Ren circled the chamber, checking for additional exits and potential vulnerabilities. Will they be able to detect us here? No, Thorn said with growing confidence. This chamber is shielded by layers of earth and old magic. It was designed to withstand the chaos of planetary transformation. As if confirming his assessment, the distant tremors that had plagued the floating platforms above were imperceptible here. The chamber hummed with quiet energy, self-contained and secure. Petra immediately began exploring, trailing her fingers along the ancient console with innocent curiosity. Bioluminescent traces followed her touch, the old systems responding to her unique connection with living energy. She's interfacing with it, Thorn observed with fascination. the chamber recognizes her abilities. Ren's maternal concern warred visibly with practical necessity. Is it safe for her? The systems are dormant, not dead, he assured her. They're simply acknowledging her. As Petra continued her exploration, Ren pulled Thorn aside, her voice low and urgent. What now? We can't stay here forever. We don't need forever, he replied. Just until morning. The Magister vessel will complete its patrol and return to the station. Once it's gone, we can reassess. And if the harvesters have established a foothold in the gardens? Thorn's expression hardened. Then we'll remove them. Ren studied him, noting the change in his demeanor. You're talking about fighting. I thought you refused to weaponize your abilities. I refuse to create weapons of mass destruction, he corrected. Protecting 2 lives from those who would exploit them is different. Their conversation was interrupted by Petra's excited call. Look what I found. The child stood before a section of the console that had illuminated fully, displaying a 3-dimensional projection of the entire garden complex. Tiny lights moved across the floating platforms, some in organized patterns that suggested Magister security forces, others moving erratically, clearly searching. It's showing us where everyone is, Petra explained. Thorn approached the display with professional interest. The original monitoring system. I didn't know it was still functional. Can they see us? Ren asked, immediately concerned. No. Thorn pointed to the base of the projection where the terraforming chamber should have been. We don't even appear on the schematic. As far as this system is concerned, this chamber doesn't exist anymore. For the first time since their arrival, Ren's posture relaxed slightly. She sat on a curved section of the ancient console, pulling Petra gently onto her lap. We're safe for now, she conceded, brushing her daughter's white hair back from her forehead. Thorn watched them, this fierce mother and her extraordinary child who had disrupted his carefully maintained exile and awakened parts of himself he'd thought long dormant. In just a few days, they had transformed his perception of the gardens from prison to sanctuary, from punishment to purpose. As Petra's eyelids grew heavy with exhaustion, Ren began humming a Moravian lullaby, the haunting notes echoing softly through the ancient chamber. The sound stirred something in Thorn's memory, fragments of his own childhood before the wars, before the council, before exile. He turned away, focusing instead on the display of the gardens above, where intruders moved through his carefully tended domain with impunity. Tomorrow would bring difficult decisions, dangerous confrontations. But for tonight, in this forgotten chamber beneath the floating gardens, they had found a moment of peace. A peace he was increasingly determined to protect, regardless of the cost to himself. Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. 3.7 Sonnet